What happens when a beloved country music legend walks onto a talk show set expecting a normal interview, only to face the most disrespectful host in television history? In just 42 seconds of one single comment, Andy Cohen went from charming host to public enemy number one, and Reba McEntire made sure the entire world knew she would not be disrespected. This was supposed to be a simple promotional appearance. Reba McEntire, one of the most respected voices in country music, agreed to sit down with Andy Cohen on his late-night show. She had a new album coming out, and her team thought this would be the perfect platform to reach a wider audience. What nobody expected was that this interview would turn into one of the most shocking moments in talk show history. The stage was set. The audience was packed. The cameras were rolling. Reba walked out in a stunning black dress, her signature red hair perfectly styled, waving to the cheering crowd. Andy stood up from behind his desk. A wide smile plastered across his face as he greeted her with open arms. "Reba McEntire, everybody!" Andy announced, his voice booming through the studio. The applause was deafening. Reba sat down on the couch across from Andy's desk, crossing her legs and settling in with a warm smile. "Thank you so much for having me," Reba said, her Oklahoma accent shining through. "I'm so excited to be here." "Oh, we are thrilled to have you," Andy replied, leaning back in his chair. "Absolutely thrilled. I mean, you're a legend, a true icon." The first few minutes went smoothly. They talked about her new album, her upcoming tour dates, and some fun stories from her decades-long career. Reba was charming and funny, sharing anecdotes that had the audience laughing and clapping. Andy seemed engaged, nodding along and asking follow-up questions. But then something shifted. "So, Reba," Andy said, his tone changing slightly, "I've got to ask you something that I think a lot of people are curious about." Reba smiled, expecting a question about her music, or perhaps her personal life. "Sure, go ahead." "Country music," Andy began, leaning forward with a smirk. "I mean, let's be honest here. It's not exactly the most progressive genre, is it?" The smile on Reba's face faltered just a bit. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?" "Well, you know," Andy continued, waving his hand dismissively, "country music has always been a little bit, shall we say, behind the times. All those songs about trucks and beer and, I don't know, rural life. It's not exactly cutting edge, is it?" Reba's posture stiffened. "I think country music tells important stories about real people and real experiences," she said carefully. "It connects with millions of people all over the world." Sure, Andy said, but his tone was condescending. "But you have to admit it's pretty niche. I mean, compared to pop music or hip-hop, country is just kind of stuck in the past, don't you think?" The audience had gone quiet. You could feel the tension building in the room. Reba took a deep breath, clearly trying to maintain her composure. "Andy, I don't think that's fair," she said. "Country music has evolved tremendously over the years. There are so many talented artists pushing boundaries and creating incredible work." "Oh, come on, Reba," Andy interrupted, laughing. "You can't seriously sit there and tell me that country music is as culturally relevant as other genres. I mean, when was the last time a country song actually mattered?" Reba's eyes widened. "When was the last time a country song mattered? Are you serious right now?" "I'm just saying," Andy shrugged. "Country music is fine for, certain people. But it's not exactly mainstream culture, is it?" "Certain people?" Reba repeated, her voice rising slightly. "What exactly do you mean by certain people?" Andy laughed again, clearly not reading the room. "You know what I mean. The flyover states. The people who live in the middle of nowhere. It's not for sophisticated audiences." The audience gasped. Reba sat up straighter, her jaw tightening. "Andy, I think you need to be very careful about what you're saying right now." "Why?" Andy asked, his voice dripping with false innocence. I'm just being honest. Country music is for a very specific demographic. It's not worldly. It's not cosmopolitan. So you're saying that country music fans aren't sophisticated? Reba asked, her voice steady but her eyes blazing. That we're all just simple-minded people from small towns who don't know any better? I didn't say that, Andy backtracked slightly, but the damage was done. I'm just saying that country music doesn't have the same cultural cash as other genres. It's just a fact. A fact? Reba said, leaning forward. Andy, do you have any idea how insulting you're being right now? Not just to me, but to millions of people who love country music? Andy rolled his eyes. Oh, please, don't be so sensitive. I'm allowed to have an opinion. You're allowed to have an opinion, Reba agreed. But you invited me here as your guest, and you're sitting there disrespecting everything I've worked for my entire life. That's not an opinion. That's just rude. Rude? Andy scoffed. I'm not being rude. I'm being real. Maybe you're just not used to people being honest with you. The audience was dead silent now, everyone watching the exchange with wide eyes. Reba's hands were clenched in her lap, but her voice remained controlled. Honest? She said. You think you're being honest? You're being condescending and elitist, Andy. You're looking down your nose at an entire genre of music and the people who love it. Oh, here we go, Andy said, rolling his eyes dramatically. Now I'm an elitist because I have standards. Standards? Reba repeated, her voice tight. Is that what you call this? Having standards? Yes, Andy said smugly. I appreciate art that challenges people. Music. That makes you think. Not the same 3 chords played over and over again. Reba's expression hardened. Andy, do you even listen to country music? Have you actually sat down and listened to the lyrics, the storytelling, the musicianship? I've heard enough, Andy said dismissively. Trust me, I've heard plenty. Clearly you haven't, Reba said, because if you had, you wouldn't be sitting here making these ignorant comments. Ignorant? Andy's voice rose. Now I'm ignorant? That's rich coming from someone who sings about dirt roads. The audience collectively gasped. Several people shook their heads in disbelief. Wow, Reba said softly. You really don't hear yourself, do you? I hear myself fine, Andy shot back. I'm just saying what everyone in this room is thinking. Country music is background music for people who peaked in high school. Another gasp from the audience. This time, several people looked genuinely angry. Andy, Reba said, her voice dangerously calm. You need to stop talking right now. Why? Andy challenged. Because the truth hurts? Because you can't handle criticism? No, Reba said. Because you're embarrassing yourself, and you're too arrogant to realize it. I'm not looking down on anyone, Andy insisted, but his smirk suggested otherwise. I'm just pointing out that country music is, a little bit basic. It doesn't have the depth or complexity of other genres. Reba laughed, but there was no humor in it. Basic? You think country music is basic? Yeah, Andy said with a shrug. I mean, how many songs can you write about the same topics? Heartbreak, trucks, small towns. It's all very repetitive. And pop music isn't repetitive? Reba shot back. How many songs about partying in the club do we need? How many songs about breakups and getting back together? That's different, Andy said dismissively. How is that different? Reba demanded. Please explain to me how that's different. Andy waved his hand in the air. Pop music evolves. It changes with the times. Country music just stays stuck in the same place, singing about the same old things. That's absolutely not true, Reba said, her voice firm. Country music has evolved incredibly over the decades. The production, the songwriting, the themes, it's constantly growing and changing. If you say so, Andy said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. But from where I'm sitting, it all sounds the same to me. Maybe that's because you're not actually listening, Reba said. Maybe you've already made up your mind, and nothing I say is going to change it. You're probably right about that, Andy admitted with a laugh. I mean, I tried to get into country music once. I really did. But I just couldn't do it. It was too, I don't know, simple for me. Simple, Reba repeated flatly. Yeah, simple, Andy confirmed. Like, I need music that challenges me intellectually. Country music just doesn't do that. Reba stared at him for a long moment. Andy, you do realize you're insulting millions of people right now, don't you? Including the people in this audience who might enjoy country music? Andy looked out at the audience with a condescending smile. Oh, I'm sure there are a few country fans here. No judgment. Everyone's entitled to their taste, even if it's questionable. That was the final straw for several audience members. More whispers spread through the crowd. Someone in the back row actually booed, though they tried to hide it. Andy leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying himself. Pop music is universal. It speaks to everyone. Country music speaks to, well, a very specific type of person. There you go again, Reba said, shaking her head. A very specific type of person. Why don't you just say what you really mean, Andy? What do I really mean? Andy asked, raising his eyebrows. You think country music is for dumb people, Reba said bluntly. You think we're all just a bunch of backwards. Hillbillies who don't know good music when we hear it. Isn't that what you're really saying? Andy held up his hands. Those are your words, not mine. But that's what you're implying, Reba insisted. Every word out of your mouth has been dripping with contempt. You clearly think you're better than me, and better than everyone who enjoys country music. I don't think I'm better than anyone, Andy said, but his tone was unconvincing. I just have different tastes. Having different tastes is fine, Reba said. But you didn't invite me here to talk about different tastes. You invited me here so you could mock me and my fans on national television. That's not what I'm doing, Andy protested. Then what are you doing? Reba asked. Because from where I'm sitting, you've done nothing but insult country music for the past 10 minutes. Andy sighed dramatically. Look, Reba, I'm sorry if you can't handle a little criticism. But this is my show, and I get to ask whatever questions I want. Criticism? Reba repeated. Andy, you're not criticizing. You're being deliberately offensive. There's a difference. I think you're being overly sensitive, Andy said. Maybe that's a country thing. The audience gasped again, louder this time. Reba's eyes narrowed. A country thing? She said slowly. Did you really just say that? I mean, you have to admit, country folks do tend to get their feelings hurt pretty easily, Andy said with a laugh. Always talking about respect and values and all that. Reba stood up. The sudden movement caught Andy off guard, and his smile faltered. What are you doing? He asked. I'm leaving, Reba said simply, reaching up to unclip her microphone. You can't leave, Andy said, his voice rising. We're in the middle of an interview. An interview? Reba said, shaking her head. Andy, this stopped being an interview about 5 minutes ago. This turned into you using me as a punching bag for your own sense of superiority. That's ridiculous, Andy said, standing up himself. Sit down, Reba. We're not done here. Oh, we are absolutely done here, Reba said firmly. I don't know what kind of guests you're used to having on this show, but I'm not going to sit here and let you disrespect me and millions of country music fans. Andy's face flushed with anger. You signed a contract to be here. You can't just walk out because you don't like my questions. Watch me, Reba said, setting her microphone down on the arm of the couch. This is unbelievable, Andy said, his voice getting louder. Do you know how many people would kill to be on this show? How many artists would love to have this platform? Then maybe you should treat them with respect when they get here, Reba said calmly, instead of using them as props for your own ego. My ego? Andy laughed harshly. You're the one who can't handle a little pushback. You're the one who's so fragile that you have to run away the second someone questions. Your precious genre. Pushback? Reba's eyes flashed. Andy, you haven't asked me a single genuine question about my music or my career. All you've done is mock and belittle country music for your own amusement. I'm a comedian, Andy said defensively. I make jokes. That's what I do. If you can't handle that, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. There's a difference between making jokes and being cruel, Reba said. And you've crossed that line about 10 times tonight. You're overreacting, Andy said, his voice taking on an edge. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You can't handle a simple conversation without getting all emotional. Reba laughed again, that same humorless laugh from before. Emotional? Andy, I'm not emotional. I'm angry. There's a difference. And I have every right to be angry when someone treats me like this. I haven't treated you any differently than I treat any other guest, Andy said defensively. Really? Reba challenged. Do you regularly tell your guests that their life's work is basic and repetitive? Do you tell them that their fans are unsophisticated? Do you make fun of where they come from? Andy's face flushed red. I was just trying to have a real conversation. No, you weren't, Reba said, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. You were trying to show off. You were trying to prove that you're smarter and cooler and more cultured than some country singer from Oklahoma. Well, congratulations, Andy. You've succeeded in making yourself look like a complete fool. How dare you, Andy sputtered. This is my show. You're a guest. You don't get to talk to me like that. And you don't get to talk to me the way you have been, Reba fired back. Guest or not, I deserve basic respect. Something you clearly know nothing about. Andy pointed his finger at her. You know what? I've interviewed hundreds of celebrities, big names, huge stars, and none of them have acted like this. Maybe because you didn't insult them for 45 minutes straight, Reba said, or maybe they just didn't have the spine to stand up to you. But I'm not going to sit here and smile while you tear down everything I love. You're being ridiculous, Andy said. I think you need to sit back down and finish this interview like a professional. A professional? Reba said, her voice incredulous. You want to talk to me about being professional? Andy, you've been nothing but unprofessional since the moment you started attacking country music. You've insulted me. You've insulted my fans. And you've shown everyone watching exactly what kind of person you really are. Get back on the couch, Andy demanded, his voice rising. Right now. No, Reba said simply. I'm done. I'm walking out of here, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. You can't just leave, Andy said, his voice almost desperate now. We have a contract. You agreed to do this interview. Sue me, Reba said, dropping her microphone on the couch. I'd rather deal with your lawyers than spend another second listening to you. Andy's face was bright red now, veins bulging in his forehead. This is unbelievable. You're acting like a child. I'm acting like someone who knows their worth, Reba corrected. Something you clearly need to learn. You're ruining my show, Andy shouted. Do you understand that? You're making me look bad. Andy, Reba said, turning to face him one last time. You're making yourself look bad. I'm just refusing to be a part of it anymore. Security, Andy yelled suddenly. Get her out of here. The audience was in complete shock. Some people were standing. Others had their hands over their mouths. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every second of the confrontation. 2 security guards appeared from the wings, looking uncertain. They clearly didn't want to be in the middle of this situation. You're having me removed by security? Reba asked, her voice calm, despite the chaos. Really, Andy? That's how low you're going to go? You refuse to finish the interview, Andy said, his voice shaking with anger. You're disrupting my show. So yes, I'm having you removed. The security guards stood there, frozen, looking between Andy and Reba. One of them cleared his throat awkwardly. Sir, the guard said to Andy, maybe we should just let her leave on her own. Did I ask for your opinion? Andy snapped at the guard. I said get her out of here. Reba looked at the security guards and smiled warmly. It's okay, gentlemen. I'm leaving on my own. No need to escort me. I know the way out. You're not going anywhere until I say so, Andy said, stepping out from behind his desk. This is my show, my stage, and you're going to stay right here until I'm done with you. Done with me? Reba said, her voice incredulous. Andy, you were done with me the second you decided to turn this into an ambush instead of an interview. An ambush? Andy threw his hands up. I asked you questions. That's what interviewers do. Just because you didn't like the questions doesn't make it an ambush. You didn't ask me questions, Reba corrected. You attacked my entire profession. You insulted my fans. You mocked everything I stand for. That's not an interview. That's a hit job. Reba looked at the security guards and smiled. It's okay, gentlemen. I'm leaving on my own. No need to escort me. She turned to the audience, giving them a small wave. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm sorry you had to witness this, but I hope you understand why I couldn't stay. The audience erupted in applause. People were standing, cheering for Reba. Some were even booing Andy, who stood behind his desk looking absolutely furious. Sit down, Andy yelled at the audience. All of you, sit down. This is my show. But nobody listened. The applause only got louder. People were whistling, clapping. Some were even chanting Reba's name. Reba! 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 The chant started small, but quickly grew, filling the entire studio. Andy's face turned an even deeper shade of red. Stop it! Stop it right now! I'm the host here. You're supposed to be on my side. But the audience had made their choice. They had watched the entire exchange, and they knew who was in the wrong. They had seen Andy's arrogance, his cruelty, his complete disregard for his guests' feelings. Reba smiled, genuinely this time, and began walking toward the exit. The applause followed her every step. You'll never work in this town again, Andy screamed after her, his voice cracking. Do you hear me, Reba? I'll make sure of it. I have connections. I have power. I'll destroy your career. Reba stopped at the edge of the stage and turned around one more time. The audience quieted down, wanting to hear what she would say. Andy, Reba said, her voice clear and strong. I've been working in this business for over 40 years. I've sold millions of records. I've won countless awards. I've built a career on talent and hard work, not on tearing other people down. So you go ahead and try to ruin me. See how far you get. You'll never work in this town again, Andy screamed after her. Do you hear me, Reba? I'll make sure of it. Reba stopped at the edge of the stage and turned around one more time. Andy, I've been working in this business for over 40 years. I've sold millions of records. I've won countless awards. I've built a career on talent and hard work, not on tearing other people down. So you go ahead and try to ruin me. See how far you get. With that, she walked off the stage. The audience was still cheering, still standing, still showing their support for the country legend who refused to be disrespected. Andy stood behind his desk, his chest heaving, his face red, his hands shaking. He looked out at the audience, at the cameras, at his producers who were frantically trying to figure out what to do next. Cut to commercial, he finally said, his voice barely audible over the noise. Somebody cut to commercial. But the damage was already done. In just 42 seconds of one thoughtless comment about country music being for certain people, Andy Cohen had turned what should have been a friendly interview into a complete disaster. He had underestimated Reba McEntire, assuming she would just sit there and take his insults with a smile. He was wrong. Backstage, Reba was greeted by her team, who immediately rushed to her side. Her manager was on the phone, already fielding calls from various media outlets who had somehow gotten word of what just happened. Are you okay? Her publicist asked, putting a hand on Reba's shoulder. I'm fine, Reba said, and she meant it. I'm actually better than fine. I should have walked out 10 minutes earlier. What he said out there, her manager said, shaking his head. That was completely out of line. I know, Reba agreed, but at least now everyone else knows it. 2. Her team gathered her things and prepared to leave the studio. As they walked through the back corridors toward the exit, they could hear the chaos still unfolding on the stage. Andy's voice carried through the walls, angry and frustrated, trying to regain control of a situation that had spiraled completely out of his hands. Back on the stage, Andy had finally gotten the audience to quiet down enough to continue, but the energy in the room had shifted entirely. What was supposed to be a fun, light-hearted talk show had turned into something else entirely. Well, Andy said, trying to force a smile, that was certainly unexpected. The audience remained silent. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Look, Andy continued, his voice defensive, I don't know what just happened there. I was just trying to have an honest conversation, and Reba completely overreacted. Still silence from the audience. I mean, come on, Andy said, laughing nervously. She couldn't handle a few questions about country music? That's pretty telling, don't you think? One person in the audience stood up and walked out. Then another. Then 3 more. Andy watched in horror as people began leaving his show. Not everyone, but enough to be noticeable. Enough to be embarrassing. Fine, he said, his voice bitter. Go ahead and leave. I don't need any of you. But even as he said it, he knew how bad this looked. His producers were probably losing their minds in the control room. His network executives were probably already on the phone, demanding explanations. Meanwhile, Reba was in her car, heading back to her hotel. Her phone was blowing up with messages of support from friends, family, and fellow artists. People who had seen what happened and wanted her to know they had her back. She smiled as she read through the messages. Yes, the interview had been a disaster. Yes, Andy had been incredibly rude and disrespectful. But she had stood up for herself. She had refused to be treated poorly, even on national television. And that was worth more than any promotional appearance ever could be. Back at the studio, Andy finished his show, but his heart wasn't in it. He went through the motions, interviewed his remaining guests, did his usual bits. But everyone could tell something was off. The energy was gone. The fun was gone. When the show finally ended, Andy retreated to his dressing room. He sat down in front of his mirror, looking at his own reflection. His makeup was smudged. His hair was messy. He looked tired. His producer knocked on the door. Andy, we need to talk. Not now, Andy said, not looking away from the mirror. Andy, the network is already calling. They want to know what happened out there. Tell them it was Reba's fault, Andy said. Tell them she was being difficult. The producer sighed. Andy, we have it all on tape. Everyone saw what happened. You can't just blame this on Reba. Andy finally turned to look at his producer. What am I supposed to say? That I messed up? That I insulted one of the biggest names in country music on live television? That would be a start, the producer said quietly. Andy turned back to the mirror, his jaw clenched. He didn't want to admit that he had been wrong. He didn't want to admit that he had let his ego get the better of him. He didn't want to admit that Reba McEntire had every right to walk off his show. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had pushed too far. He had been too arrogant, too dismissive, too cruel. And now he was paying the price. The question was, would anyone forgive him? Or would this be the moment that defined his career? The moment when he went from respected talk show host to cautionary tale? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. Reba McEntire had made her point. She had shown the world that she wouldn't tolerate disrespect, no matter who it came from. She had proven that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. And in those 42 seconds, when Andy made his comment about country music being for certain people, he had sealed his fate. He had underestimated a legend, and legends don't back down.